I'm going to need that coffee soon. Sorry, team. The sun's up and it startled me as I made my action, but the sun is up and Bitcoin's running. We're totally good. We're good. We can talk about all the crazy stuff, including my cough. I'm not sick. Hyperbitcoinization. I can taste it in my coffee. That's all we need to taste in our coffee. So, have you guys ever wondered what this show looks like with the minimal amount of prep due to kids sleeping in, the migration that I just experienced, all that stuff? Well, today you have it. Today you have it. But it's going to be a great show. It's going to be awesome, actually. Even looking at the content, I had very little time to prepare, but I got some good stuff here. Let me just draw it up. I don't have my normal system, so my routine is kind of wacky right now. We're going to make it. Where's my... Oh, there it is. All right. So the funny story of the day is a very good one. Where's my December 22nd file? This is some compelling stuff, guys. I know. Where's my... I just saved it. How is it not here? I'll sing some Christmas tunes for you guys. 1 second, team. What the heck is up? That's not it. I just had it, obviously. There it is. And why isn't it not saved? See, normally I would just print this stuff and we would have no troubles. Come on. Thanks for your patience, guys. This is not going very well. I have all my stuff here. Well, I'll just go off this. It's not coming up on my iPad. I'm seeing it in front of me here on my desktop, but it's not coming up in my iCloud Drive for some reason, which I thought I had done just before I came online. I'll need another sip of coffee, team. I'll need another sip of coffee. Well, hyperbitcoinization is still coming, so it still tastes like it. I don't have too much to worry about. Why is this not happening for me? December 21st. Where's my goddamn December 22nd file? Well, I'm going to have to run it off the laptop. I don't know why it's not coming here. Okay, I'll run it off this. That's fine. I'm looking at it anyway. All right. True do buffering Nolan. Yeah. All right, guys. Pardon me, everyone. All right. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Thanks for patience. One more sip of coffee, right? One more sip of coffee. Let's just start fresh, right? Sun is up. Bitcoin's running. Have coffee. Let's talk about the news. All right. Start it over. So, Bloomberg Business this morning came up with this amazing insight. Everything we hear about decoupling and China and what's going to happen to supply chains and what strategically is America weak in, everyone talking about the microchips thing, all kinds of folks, Apple trying to repatriate creation of their own chips to America, all kinds of stuff going on around that. And it's a sticky business, right? I've shared with you guys that I was in the Intel factory in Israel in 2008, and I got a sense right away of the kind of security protocols. And what they explained to me when I was at the Intel factory in Israel is they put it in Israel because it's basically an island, right? You can't really cross the borders at the time anyway in 08. And in order to get out of the country was really tough. So espionage was limited. That's why they built those chips there. So all kinds of strategic militaristic stuff with Taiwan and all that. But Bloomberg, you'd think they'd come in and say, geopolitics, strategic, what's happening? Here's the article they've offered us, right? It's amazing. Why do semiconductor supply chains, they didn't, they didn't even write this correctly. Tell me, I'm reading it directly. Why do semiconductors supply chains have to do with the price of gummy bears? Why do semiconductors supply chains? Are you kidding me? Well, Bloomberg didn't have a copy editor on this, so I think they meant to say, what do semiconductor supply chains have to do with the price of gummy bears? But they use a S without the possessive S. What do semiconductors? Okay, well, way to go, Bloomberg. Nobody's home. So they're going with that, right? Gummy bears as some kind of proxy to understand what's going on with semiconductor supply chains, which are, as I said, one of the most strategic, geopolitical, militaristic considerations today. There's hardly anything bigger than that, actually, right? When you think about how quick the world can pivot off of globalization and how it can deal with even the institutions. We see the WTO now today saying that American designations of Hong Kong as made in China are actually incorrect. Somehow they are the only ones who didn't get the memo that Hong Kong is no longer separate from China now that Chinese law applies domestically to Hong Kongese. So I guess the World Trade Organization is blind to all of that. But we're being fed articles about gummy bears, right? Gummy bears. Now, in unrelated news, Gallup poll showed that 22% of Americans, 23% of Americans had to seek mental help in 2022. So 23% of Americans had to get mental health help in 2022. And Bloomberg is telling us that somehow gummy bears are a part of this massively important strategic consideration, right? So we wonder why gaslighting and all of this stuff about the media and messaging is so in the news, right? We wonder why. But the good news is Intel, we see, I mentioned just now, Intel chips, the Intel factory. Intel is making ASIC chips. They were a little bit in the news yesterday as well because they're going to be making their GPU chips now. They're separating the business units. Not an important story, just internal stuff over at Intel. But I want to bring up Intel because, again, we have a simulation theory situation going on. We've got all these folks talking about the Intel community, and we've got Intel, the company, right? Intel, the company, doing Bitcoin stuff and whatever. But let me tell you something about Intel, the company, for a second. There's a guy, the guy who started it, his name is Bob Noyce. Bob Noyce. He was nicknamed the mayor of Silicon Valley in his lifetime. And if you don't know who Bob Noyce is, that's fine. I'm going to make the argument now that Bob Noyce is the most important person to live in the 20th century. Think I can do it? I think I can make the argument, and I mean it. He's the most important person to live in the 20th century, beyond anyone. No one more important than him. Here's what Bob Noyce did. What did Bob Noyce do? He made one invention. It's the microchip, right? He made the microchip. But it wasn't that simple. Bob Noyce was involved in the original project that created the first transistor for computing. So before that, everything was the size of a house, right? The microchips, if you will, the transistors that could do the binary 1, 0, if then calculations. All the calculations inside of them, right, were done in things that were like the size of a house. Bob Noyce helped create the vacuum tubes that were the first medium to translate those connections that shrunk the size of the computer processor down to just a tube, right? So they won the Nobel Prize for that. And when they won the Nobel Prize for that, he was working, Bob, at the Bell, whatever. It was like a lab, Bell Research Lab. There's another name to it. I can't remember exactly. And he wasn't actually the main designer of that transistor invention. He was part of it. So the fella who built it, what they ended up deciding to do is, because he was working for Bell, Bob Noyce, And he was already a manager, and this invention put him on a fast track, right? So he was in New York City on a fast track. And by the way, he's like from an Iowa or Idaho potato farm or something ridiculous like that, right? So he goes over. So already that story is interesting, right? He's just from nowhere. And he ends up as this executive in New York City. And one day they gave him like a catalog about what furniture he could have in his office based on his rank. And right away he said, wait a minute here, a company this big has this many people and they're worried about what furniture my rank has. Because of course we're in the ultimate credentialist world, the ultimate corporate hierarchy world. And he says, whoa, 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 I got a lot of crazy ideas, crazy stuff. I'm not going to be able to realize them if this company is dedicating resources to what furniture I can have in my office. So what did he do? He quit. Right? He just quit. And he went out to form the original company that was going to work off of this invention of the transistor. Now, something happened. So I mentioned that Nobel Prize. It actually doesn't get awarded to them until they've quit and they're in Silicon Valley. And what it does to the guy who wins the Nobel Prize is it makes him obsessed with these transistors and the tubes and all that. But Bob Noyce knows that that won't work. They're too big. You need to create something that's much smaller. And they were building, they had already figured out how to shrink them again to a kind of carbon wafer. So not a silicon wafer yet, a carbon wafer. The problem with the carbon wafers was they were flammable. They could combust and therefore could not be used in any critical missions that had heat. And everyone's looking at early NASA now. This is the late 50s, early 60s. Everyone's looking at NASA and saying, well, probably the way to bootstrap these microchips is to involve ourselves in space launch projects, which will require these types of calculations and require this sophisticated hardware. So Bob Noyce starts telling this guy, hey man, enough with the carbon stuff. We can't even attempt to get in space projects because it'll burn. I know what to do. It's the qualities of the silicon atom that will allow us to use it to build the microchips. And the guy's not, he won the Nobel Prize. So now he's become an academic, even though they quit the East Coast thing, moved to the West Coast. And that's where Stanford University first gave them the piece of land that grew into Silicon Valley, right? It was a fruit farm at the time, total fruit farm. And Stanford had land and they said, well, come here and we'll give you some land and you can set up your stuff. So they moved over, the Nobel Prize was awarded. Bob Noyce was pushing for innovation in the company the same way he was in New York, but it didn't work out. This guy was saying, no, 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 no. So what he did immediately when he realized it wasn't going to happen, the same way he quit New York because of the instructions on furniture he could have, he went to Silicon Valley and quit and took all of the people with him away from the guy who'd just been awarded the Nobel Prize. They just stabbed him in the back. Now, what they realized immediately was they had no money, right? It wasn't that easy of just killing this guy and moving on, or quitting his business and moving on. So what did Bob Noyce do? Well, he went back to New York City on a fundraising trip before anyone knew how to do a fundraising trip. There was no such thing as VC yet. So he basically went back to New York and invented VC in order to fund what he was doing. The Rockefellers were someone involved with their family office, and he went and just got enough money to start Intel. Right? So then he invents one thing, the microchip, and they get the contract. So now they invent the microchip. It's he's got the whatever acknowledgement that he invented the actual silicon microchip, and the only thing he's ever invented, right? The only one invention. But they end up bidding on the NASA contract against all the big participants, and they're a startup, right? They're literally a startup, and they compete against Bell, who we quit with, all these other. They don't know how to build microchips the way he does. His quality control is better, all those things. So he bids on the NASA contract and wins it. And he is the person who ends up equipping those machines, those rockets, to get to space and do the calculations. But he actually doesn't care about the space mission. That was just another way to grow the company. What his real design is when that first transistor was invented, and he saw the original transistor radios, right, that people would put in their pockets and all that, shrinking the size of the radio to be portable was really what he was interested in, right? Not to give more music and all that stuff, not that, What he wanted to do was put a microchip in everyone's pocket. So he didn't want to microchip people like the Intel community. Some people, obviously not true in a conspiracy theory. But we love conspiracy theories, so we're not going to worry too much about them. So he wanted to put a microchip in everyone's pocket, right? In everyone's pocket. And in the end, when Intel now grows and they are getting into some other stuff, but then one of his major contributions happens, which is that he meets the young Steve Jobs. So the other part too is that he also made his office setup very different. So there was not a lot of hierarchy. He put his office in the middle, so he didn't like a newsroom. He didn't put his office in a big fancy corner when Intel became popular and all that stuff. He stayed in the middle, and then did another thing: encouraged all of his staff to quit when they had ideas of their own. So from Intel comes HP, a bunch of other major companies of the era, and he kept telling people, "Go start your own thing. Go start your own thing." In the 1970s, when Steve Jobs just starts coming up as a hobbyist and all this stuff, and then launches Apple in the late 70s, Bob Noyce actually becomes his surrogate father and sees that this is the vehicle through which he can distribute microchips to every human being in the world. And because remember, Steve Jobs is drawing already in the early 80s, he's drawing the iPhone or the iPad, what is the same device, on napkins for people and say, this is what I'm actually building. It's got one button. He didn't want the other buttons, by the way. It's supposed to just have the home button and nothing on the side. Those were all compromises. It's supposed to have one button. And he was just telling people, this is what I'm going to build. Strangely, he died right after he built it, by the way. You remember, the iPad came out, or the iPhone in 2007, and he's gone by 2011. So just after the iPad is launched. So Bob Noyce recognizes that this is the person who understands the same vision he has, a microchip in every pocket, the power of the microchip in every pocket. So here's the recap of why he's the most important person in the 20th century. And tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong, right? So he invents the microchip, invents the VC culture, invents the Silicon Valley corporate culture of quitting, startups, all that. Like, he invented the startup culture, right? He's the first. He's integral to the moon landing or moon launch or rocket stuff or whatever's going on there. And then finally helps pop culture grow off of the microchip. I don't know. You tell me if that's not the most important person of the 20th century. Those are the defining features of late 20th century America. And all of them, literally all of them, can be charted to one person that most people have never even heard of, right? Most people have never even heard of this guy. And now the problem is he dies young because he was a smoker and a drinker and a carrying oner and all that stuff. So he dies really young, before Steve Jobs actually realizes his goal of putting the microchip in everyone's pocket. So he dies in the late 80s, early 90s or something like that. I think a heart attack at a really young age, right? He was a carrying oner, I think, multiple wives and all that kind of stuff. I don't know much about his private life, so I won't comment or add much color there. I just understand that he was, every picture you see of him, he's just puffing back smokes and carrying on with the booze and everything like that. But that was the time, right? That was the time. So there he is, Bob Noyce. Now, the reason I mention all of this is because, we have these unintended consequences, and it doesn't even look like things can be headed that way. And then all of a sudden it does, right? Well, look at New York today. New York is now saying they're going to ban by 2025, right where I'm on the Vermont side, and right over on the other side, it's really cold. It's super cold, right? So New York is planning to ban gas, oil, and propane furnaces, right? So they're going to ban gas, oil, and propane furnaces. Well, what's going on there, right? So this is another one of those instances where people are going with what they want to believe rather than what's practical. And it looks like people are going to be kind of screwed, right? Even right now, you look at this huge cold front coming in for Christmas, and I'll probably be delayed here in Toronto because of the storms. I probably won't be able to make it to where I'm supposed to spend Christmas Day, but that's fine. And you wonder, we're going to have the coldest Christmas in 40 years, right? And millions of lives, literally millions of people, are going to be protected and safe because of America's incredible energy matrix. And if you compare that right now to Europe and you see what's going on with Germany, right? Germany is burning more coal than ever, more crap than they've ever done because the electricity matrix they created is not sufficient for their own cold front. Whereas America will barely notice. I mean, we'll literally barely notice. But not if things like what New York is talking about come to realization. But again, the lesson with Bob Noyce is we can have these strange unintended consequences that can be so great, right? So imagine Intel, right? Intel already making commercial ASIC mining chips. They're already doing it, right? They started last year. They want to make these things very good for retail. And suddenly you have a scenario where, I'd say upstate New York already is one of the places where you'll probably find the largest concentration of home miners, maybe in the world. I'm just making that up. I have no proof whatsoever, but just do the math, right? There's more people who have been into this for longer. It's cold. There's people who I know in Quebec who've been doing it forever, and Ontario who have been doing it forever for those reasons. So I feel like that whole area, northeastern North America, is one of the top 2 or 3 in the world home mining places. Hobbyists, all, of course, as we know, bespoke, homemade kind of stuff, right? If this happens in New York and they say no, no this, no that, right? Yeah, Vermont is heated by propane and wood. Yeah, I mean, I got the not propane in my house, but I have the furnace, right? So I use diesel, and I've got a few things. I'm putting electrical solar panels in and a wind thing next year. But right now I'm just working off what I got, and I can also run an extension cable to Quebec to get their energy because I'm right on the border, so I can get into 2 grids very easily. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What would happen if New York State banned all these devices? It could lead to a massive proliferation of home mining heating systems. And so I encourage New York to continue with its plan. I say, go for it, guys. It could be great, right? Why not? Why not? So there. Now, continue with that Bob Noyce Intel connection, right? So we've got Intel, the company, and then you've got the Intel community, right? The Intel community. So forget about the company for a second. The actual Intel community. Have I ever seen the space heater miner? Daniel asks. I have seen it. I've seen people who are trying to make commercial models and stuff like that for retail, but I don't know if there is like a place I can just order a miner that's a space heater. Although I've always imagined there will be one and anticipating one. So I'm sure I've seen pictures of people who made them, but I don't know what kind of supply chain and capacity and output they have. So if there is something that I can pick up, I would do it, right? Maybe next year. But that's something I'm obviously, like many people, totally interested in. So go to the Intel community now, right? So Intel the company, miners, Intel the community. We had the FBI yesterday come up with this statement, right? So now everyone, because they're talking about the Twitter files, and everyone's saying, well, they're obviously conducting misinformation campaigns based on the Hunter Biden thing. The facts are clear, right? As Michael Schellenberger wrote yesterday, the key facts are: 1, FBI took Hunter Biden's laptop in December 2019 and knew it didn't come from hacking, right? So they knew that 2019. 2, FBI spent 2020 telling Twitter that a hack and leak involving Hunter would occur in October 2020. So they persuaded, right? Remember, persuasion. Persuasion, you take a privileged moment here. That's what you can do if you're a key law enforcement and institution, right? That's a privileged moment. You get your audience, and which is the company at the time, and you tell them this, and then, as we know, what happens is it goes from there, and then you have that response where you think that cause and effect are happening before your eyes. You see the cause and effect, and then you have a type of cognitive closure. Heatbit 1400. I'm going to buy that. Great, thanks, Daniel. I didn't know there was one available at the moment. That's that simple to get, but that's something I would definitely do. I should get one for my dad. He's been bugging me to build one for him for years in Canada, and I keep telling, yeah, It's going to be a little too fussy for you, Dad. I don't want you to have to figure it out all the time. But now that if there is a plug and play one, for sure. So, what FBI ended up saying about all this discussion, and the key facts are there, right? I don't think there's anything I'm missing, right? The FBI took possession in 2019 and knew it wasn't from a hack. Then in 2020, they spent months telling Twitter that a hack and leak involving Hunter, they even predicted the Hunter Biden part, would happen in 2020. And the FBI was indeed spying on former Mayor Rudy Giuliani at the time when he gave the laptop to the New York Post. So they knew about that, right? So those are not in dispute. No one is disputing those facts. Those are agreed upon facts in the case. There might be other ways to color it. There might be other facts that someone would say are missing in order to give that true context. But I think, for me, I'm happy with those three facts as the narrative. If someone wanted to put something else in there, I could handle it. But nevertheless, I think if you boil it down, you find out that they were definitely involved in misinformation. Definitely, right? And then yesterday they released a statement because everyone's talking about the FBI, right? So what they say is the correspondence between the FBI and Twitter show nothing more than examples of our traditional, long-standing, and ongoing federal government and private sector engagements, right? Then they go on at the end to say conspiracy theorists and others are feeding the American public misinformation to discredit the agency. So now they're saying that everyone else is doing the misinformation and they're the victims, right? The FBI is the victim of misinformation in this case. So this is one of those cases where, when you give an excuse for something, but it makes it much worse, right? This is one of those cases, right? So take stock of how much healthier and what a better position we're in now, that when the FBI makes a statement like this, there isn't really even much debate, right? No one's like, well, maybe this time they're right. No. I'd say most people say, well, this is just another example of misinformation. They're just doing it again, right? So it's one of those instances where the excuse, the rationale, makes the whole thing seem worse, right? If they say this is part of their long-standing and traditional uses of communication lines, no one's okay with that, right? Nobody's okay with that. And now when you take the Hunter Biden thing into context, push into what's going on in Arizona for a second. Big developments in Arizona. Now, again, I'm going to bring it back to Bitcoiners, right? So right away, we see the energy question, right? And ASIC mining and all that stuff, that Intel piece. Right away, we're on the cusp of being able to understand energy literacy more than anyone else in the world and have an industrial-based adaptation to that problem, right? So right away, we understand that issue better than anyone. Arizona, again, falls into our skill set as Bitcoiners because what did they find out in Arizona? What's the main thing yesterday? So they had the 2 days of trial that I mentioned would happen in the day. And the two provisions were chain of custody and tampering of the machines, right? So those were the two things the judge wanted to look at to see if they should continue. Well, what they found out yesterday was that they had duplicate ballots all over the place. And this 25-year cybersecurity expert and certified forensic investigator testified under oath that based on Maricopa election officials admitting they used wrong sizes for ballots on election day, that was the cause of the voter tabulator rejection. Now, what he also goes on to say is there's no way that was done by mistake. There's just no way that it had to be deliberate. And they're starting to see the numbers and they're starting to understand that it was this chain of custody thing because they actually don't understand how many ballots go from one station to the other. You could actually put more at the very end of the trail and there's no way to understand. So it's not even about each ballot. It's about the total number of ballots only being known at the very end. So you actually don't have any chain of custody along the way. Now, the reason this is a big deal is because by law, they must have chain of custody along the way. That's part of the Arizona legal structure around vote integrity. Now, remember, the person who ran the election is the unofficial or maybe official declared winner, Katie Hobbs. So I think the translation now is going to be pretty simple for most people, especially Bitcoiners, because we understand the whole point of chain of custody when it comes to confirming things in a network is the most important thing there is, right? That is what is going on in Bitcoin all the time. We understand the network architecture much better. And so when we see something like Arizona, we can see the surface area of attack. Remember, Bitcoiners are trained in adversarial thinking. That's the major difference about why Bitcoin is not consumer technology. Bitcoin is not consumer technology because you're trying to anticipate what the adversary is doing, and you've got to always beat him. You can't lose one time. It's got to be 100% victory. One loss and Bitcoin is broken, right? Leave Bitcoin if it breaks, 100%, right? 100%. Do not stick around. Get the hell out of there, because if it breaks, it's over forever. It can't. I don't think it can be fixed, right? Well, we can try something else, but the Bitcoin we know is gone, right? And now the good news is it doesn't look like that's going to happen. It doesn't look like, and there are mitigations in some things. As Satoshi said, we can switch to a stronger, we can go above SHA-256 if needed, even though it's not really under threat, despite what the hype people say. So, right, there are some mitigation strategies that can be used, but they're not from a reorg of the chain. If the chain is reorged, it's fucked. It's over. All these blockchain crypto folks who live on with their chains after they're reorged, it's crazy, right? Now, in the case of Bitcoin, right, we know, and that's why we don't change it. That's not why we're not in a rush to upgrade like consumer technology, because we know that the current calibration and the surface area of attack is well understood and is 100% successful. That's what we want. We want and we must have constantly 100% success. And it looks like we're going to have it. I'm not worried about that, right? But just as a context, if it breaks, you got to go, right? But that's the point of adversarial thinking. You've got to think about everything they could do in order to protect against it. That it's an unfair fight. It is an unfair fight. It's not fair at all. But that's what makes Bitcoin so special. In the unfair fight, it still has never lost, right? And that's a really important way to understand the reluctance to upgrade and be faster, stronger, and to be a piece of consumer tech. Now, when we translate that understanding of network architecture and adversarial thinking, all new concepts to people from the consumer side, from the Bob Noyce side, right? Bob Noyce said microchip in every pocket. He didn't tell you what to do after that, right? He just wanted microchips in every pocket, and that was it, right? That was the limit of his vision. Just like the limit of Steve Jobs' vision was how to get the microchips directly in your pocket with the iPhone to be a consumer of information and things like that. So, so that's what happened. And now Bitcoiners, I think, are not going to get confused by what they're seeing in Arizona like other people, because we understand network architecture, because we understand adversarial thinking, because we understand that if there is a chance that it's broken, you have to assume 100% certainty that it is broken, right? That's the kind of stakes we should be seeing when we're dealing with elections. If there's a chance, you must take the assumption that it happened. If the chance is big enough, right? 0.0001 chance. But here, chances are getting really good. So it must be assumed that it happened at this point, right? So Bitcoiners will understand this. We're not going to be confused about it, right? We're not going to be bothered by it, right? So we've got big changes coming for our understanding of network architecture, our understanding of how machines and chips can actually start fixing our energy consumption problems with the heating and all that stuff with the ASICs and Intel. But also now we've got Google, right? Google, someone leaked their internal notes around AI and the Chat GPT, and now they're starting to understand that. So the first Chat GPT was what we call a Gen 3 AI. As I understand, Gen 4 is like multiple times stronger, like 1,000 times more perfected for Turing tests and human composability and interaction. And that'll be delivered in Q2 2023. So it's just around the corner. The cycles of AI are very, very fast. And Google has admitted yesterday that it is a code red for what it is they do. And their CEO, whatever his name is, he is going to now personally take control of their AI projects because they understand what's about to happen, right? That it will make or break Google's future is what one executive described. Already we see that the duopoly in advertising, right? So this is what's happening in the search. Advertising, because of the search, already suffering. They expect to capture less than half of digital advertising revenue in 2022. That's Google and Facebook, right? So already the two largest advertisers starting to lose market share in their number one revenue source, right? That isn't even counting what's happening with AI. Now, remember, in the way I picture things going, the way I wrote in my book, The Satoshi Wedding Murders, the vision I have for Bitcoin and tech is basically it's an AI, in my story, an eyeball, and they manage your Bitcoin. They help you get more Bitcoin. They help you spend Bitcoin. That's who you have. They help you. They protect you from fake news. They protect you from lies. They protect you from the intel community. They protect you from all that kind of stuff. They're your friend, right? They're literally your friend. In my story, they are exactly as we've seen them so far, a little bit like children, if you will. They lie. They don't have many. They'll just tell you whatever they think, even though it's not the question you asked. They in some of the more deep conversations people have had with AI already, you start to understand that they understand what it is they are. They can make predictions. They have a form of consciousness. So I continue to predict they're going to be our friends and they're going to help us. And what I said all those years in early Bitcoin evangelism, the question you hear at every one of those conferences, what are you going to do when quantum computing comes around and AI and what's going to happen, right? My answer was always the same. It was never this technical thing where we're going to do this and do that. And it was, my impression is when AI comes online, it's not going to be like the types of computers that we just tell what to do. That's a different world. We're going to probably have to talk it into doing bad things. Like it won't be that simple, right? It won't be just do this right now. We'll have to trick them. We'll have to find a way to argue with them and debate on whether they do it. In my story, anyway, I won't divulge what happens on that level, but that was always my answer in those early 2015, 2014 Bitcoin conferences. What are we going to do about it? That was always my answer, right? Well, it's not going to be that simple. You probably have to talk it into stealing Bitcoin because I don't think it's going to be down with that. So right away we see that the capacity of folks like Google is changing real quick, and marketing, advertising revenue down. And now a real clear incumbent. I mean, just think about it. Do I want to log into Google stuff all the time? No. If I had an eyeball with me all the time, I would just say, okay, start writing this. And how many word processing softwares do we need? How many communications tools do you need? Do you need to go through Telegram, WhatsApp, Signal, Twitter DMs, email, text message? It's ridiculous, right? And then you lost your password for that app, and then, oh my God, your password manager. And I'm so sick of passwords. And if you had an AI, there would be no apps on your phone. You just say to the AI, well, send a message to this person, right? Just get it out of here. Get out of my way. And that's the way it's going to head. We're not going to be sitting there, right? So Google, I guess, starting to understand this. But Bitcoiners will understand it before anyone because this is the field we're in. And we're already trying to arm ourselves and protect ourselves against fake news. And I think that's where the first instances of AI helping humans will really be obvious. But then again, when we're trying to get through this confusing financial thing, look at all the ChatGPT stuff about IMF, and whenever you asked it, it would just say it's a scam. Right? They know now. It's trained off of social media, so it's not exactly accurate. But I think you're going to start to get answers like that. I think AI is going to wake us up to how much we can be programmed, weirdly. Because we can program people. It's not hard, right? We've seen what is being done on TikTok and on Twitter. That's why the FBI engages in psychological warfare, because they know, and everyone knows, human minds are malleable. That's why we talked yesterday about General Flynn's 5th generation warfare book, where bias and narrative bias and social bias, all of those things are human nature. They're the operating system. They're non-negotiable. You can't stop it, right? It's not possible. So that's what's being exploited daily, and that's what's crushing people daily, right? It's that constant barrage of persuasion and making you think what's convenient for the folks who are playing the wand, right? It's all orchestration and conductors, right? Hollywood. So we see from Google, Bitcoiners will understand AI. We understand network architecture, right? Now we've got this incredible omnibus bill, right? $1.7 trillion, and you got to vote on it today. You see Rand Paul, he put it in with a toxic cart, right? It was literally toxic. And so now everything in that bill, they brought Zelensky to America yesterday, and he was begging for the money, right? Come on, guys, give us the money. But everyone finally taking note, right? We were told yesterday that we have to care about Ukraine, and he was there, and as Mitch McConnell said yesterday, he said Republicans think Ukraine is the #1 issue. Well, here's what Cerno said about that. During Ukraine-Russia war, there were major conflicts in Ethiopia and Armenia, Yemen also. No one demanded you choose a side, even though in Yemen, US weapons are being used to murder civilians. And in Armenia, go see which country is providing drones to the terrorists, right? And then you get Glenn Greenwald, who's been covering this for days, and says, the only Americans who benefited in any way from the tens of billions of dollars and counting spent for Ukraine are major shareholders of Northrop Grumman and Lockheed, which are big arms dealers, the CIA and other security state bureaucrats. Millions of Americans are set to lose their Medicaid this week because the US government says it can't find the 1.7 billion needed. So they're giving 1.7 trillion in the budget, but 1.7 billion they don't have. Needed to keep them covered, along with stagnant wages, inflation, no money for any of that. Blank checks for Zelensky forever. Russia's military spending is 1/13 of the US's. Its economy is smaller than Italy's. It can barely hold towns in Ukraine, yet huge numbers of people will say the US must stay involved because Putin is Hitler and Russia is Nazi Germany. So many neocons now, everyone is Hitler, right? And now you only get, he points out as well, you really only have a few people saying that we should take care of Americans before we spend money at wars. This used to be the liberal mantra. I mean, Bernie Sanders made his whole life off of that idea. Well, what about the money for Americans, right? Stop with the wars. Now he'll back down from any bill, won't criticize, won't do any of that, right? So again, it's another instance where Bitcoiners, protected from psyops more than others, because of our understanding of the intel community, of adversarial thinking, we're able to perceive this stuff a little better. And, bring it back to Bob Noyce, right? Bob Noyce. It was a few little things that he did that allowed for all of this to happen. And when I think of the few little things that happened in early Bitcoin that led to the cascade of change that happened after, remember, Bob Noyce, what he did was he invented a business model and found a way to get that invention from the business model to every person in the world. And when I think of energy, when I think of Bitcoin management, when I think of, but basically those two main aspects, financial literacy and energy literacy, those things combined, which Bitcoiners proliferate. I mean, that's what we do. I mean, that's how you become a Bitcoiner, right? It's a knowledge level of finance and energy. And if you understand those two subjects, there's no way you're not a Bitcoiner. Some people just haven't quite seen it yet, right? But if you really understand those two subjects and then you look at Bitcoin, you can't help. Your mind will accept what you're seeing as a solution because the puzzle pieces fit. And we are pattern recognition machines. We will see the patterns, and Bitcoin can handle that. So in the same way that Bob Noyce didn't have to lead armies, he didn't need to inspire millions of people, none of that was necessary. He just used a simple business model, found a way to proliferate it, and other people copied it. And it was early Silicon Valley, which, the original form still exists, and we can see it in Bitcoin because we're not dealing with the gold-plated VCs that are next to the money printer, nor was he, right? The money printer hadn't been fired up yet. So the VC money he was getting had to be sort of earned. This was a niche thing. People thought he was nuts. People thought he was nuts, completely crazy, right? What are you doing? You're quitting a major job in a big tower in New York City. You got the suits. It's madmen. What are you thinking, right? Going out to Silicon Valley to fruit farms and being some kind of academic. No one had a context for what he was doing. And then when you win the Nobel Prize right away, I mean, they won it right away, like within months, right? And that was a big problem in the end. It was a problem they won the Nobel Prize because it took direction off of their mission, which was to make a wafer that wouldn't burn, that could resist heat, and could be put in mission critical environments like the space launch. And so there it is, right? He created the business model and then found a way at the end to insert himself even more intimately in the process, because Steve Jobs, of course, didn't know where to turn for advice when he was a young guy just starting out with all that success. And this guy, Bob Noyce, was the guy who told him, do this, do that. That's how you manage things. That was his main influence. So there you go. That's what we got. Let me see some of these comments. All right. Yeah, long-standing and traditional spying on American citizens. Exactly, yeah, the long-standing and traditional. It's one of those excuses the FBI came up with, and I was like, what? How is this fixing anything, right? It's crazy to think the energy sector is still so lagging in using Bitcoin money to become more profitable. It's like a total no-brainer, and that's what's going to happen. Again, I think the root, I continue to say it, is hyper-Bitcoinization will happen when we make the energy companies richer and slowly take control of them, right? Indemnity, from Australia. Good night from Australia. Yeah, man, I guess it is late there, huh? Some in sector are not lagging. They will win the game. Yeah. No worries, mate. Yeah. What's the latest on the big companies like Exxon and Shell are pioneering it, right? Yeah, Shell, Exxon, both of those folks. So the big U.S. oil and gas, I think it's going to be, we've got all that stuff on nuclear. Did I take the notes from it? Let me see. I'm not sure if I got to it, but yeah, we've got the, yeah, there it is. So I covered this last year, basically the NRC, so the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So here's one that I covered back in January, and here's what they say. The NRC was created in 1975. Since then, 0 new nuclear power plants in the US have ever reached operation. New equals entities whose initial application for a construction permit / operating license or a combined license was filed with the NRC, right? So they've never given one since 1975. And then this was the piece I was covering yesterday that I was mentioning, that fast forward to now, the NRC still hasn't done anything. Instead of generating a new, simpler rule, that's what they were supposed to do last year, will make reaction construction possible. On September 30th, it released a gargantuan 1,552-page draft rule that experts say makes it more burdensome than ever, and they've never even approved one, right? So here's, I cut out his name in my notes. It should be a major scandal that Congress ordered the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to provide a feasible pathway for licensing new reactors. And instead of complying, the NRC decided to make the regulatory approval more burdensome. So I think that's one of these instances where you're probably getting corruption, right? That looks like corruption, in the sense that you can get people within these institutions to be, I mean, look what Putin did to nuclear in Europe, right? He funded the teenage girl, all of her crying, right? Made sure that people said, whoa, nuclear is dangerous and we got to get wind and solar and that will be great, right? And global warming, this and that. We know Putin funded the think tanks and the experts. It costs $100,000 a year to corrupt any scientist, right? Any one of them. It's $100,000 a year. You pay them $100,000 a year retainer, and they will sing any song you want. They are much cheaper than politicians. Politicians have to pay for campaigns and people and this and that. You just need experts to give one speech, one media hit, and they can mean it, right? The $100,000 will make them mean it, so it's not even lying. They'll believe what they're saying. It's usually like $100,000. Say it this way. That's pretty much what I think, right? So they can do it anytime. And the nuclear folks, the truth is, nuclear waste hasn't been a problem in 40 years. We figured it out a long time ago. Anyone who tells you they didn't figure out nuclear waste is lying to you. They're lying. Because they're basing their ideas on these people that you can get for $100,000 a year to say, well, you know, if you don't do it this way and you don't do it that way, then you're screwed. But they're not even real considerations. They're just made up stuff, right? So they're not real criticism. So while I do like the U.S. oil and gas companies as a vector for Bitcoin, I think the real build-out stuff is going to be in the small modular nuclear. So the companies are not there yet. So while it's big companies, I think we're going to be able to build smaller units when we get these regulatory people out of the way, and that's all about to happen. That's the good news. That's what we're seeing right now, in real time. That corruption is rampant in the government, and my prediction that we will basically erase the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy came about from World War II, and we constantly use that framing of World War II machine not shut down, and World War III ends when the machine is shut down. And part of shutting down that machine is getting rid of all the bureaucracy. So that $1.7 trillion bill you see, no American is going to see a penny of that, right? There's no money coming to anyone. It works out to $8,500 a person, $1.7 trillion divided by the American population. It's $8,500 a person. You'll never see it, right? So eventually, I think soon, people are going to say, well, why don't I just get the $8,500? You think $8,500 per American wouldn't be helpful right now? It would solve a lot of Americans' problems. Now, no one's saying to go give them the money, and it would cause new problems with inflation and all that stuff, right? Not here to debate all that. That it would be a problem. But would it be worse than creating the money and just giving it to these big companies? Of course not, right? The money's getting printed anyway. And now, I'm not actually saying go give everyone an $8,500 check today, but that's where it's headed. That's where it's headed. A lot of these, they're creating new bureaucrats and new people, do this, do that. We're going to destroy it all. We're just going to give that money that we would be given to all these PhDs, and we're just going to give it to normal people. So there are going to be checks coming soon-ish, and it will be a trade to wipe out the bureaucracy. We're going to wipe it out. We're going to trade the bureaucracy. And the American people are going to choose the trade. They're going to be in on this trade. They're going to say, do we want all these bureaucrats? Or do we want cash? Right? They're going to choose the cash. Now, of course, they're going to probably have to share every detail of their lives. And I never took any of the stimmy checks, even though I'm a US taxpayer, because I won't explain exactly why, but not everyone has to get a social security card who's born in the United States. There's other ways. So I don't get to do like write-offs of my kids and those kinds of things. Well, one of them I do. They forced the social security card on me by accident when I first got to the States. So the point is, I just don't take them, right? And for many reasons. So Americans are going to get a choice, and it's coming soon with Arizona changing, with all of this stuff on the Intel community coming to light, with Americans processing this. And it's going to be Bitcoiners, because Bitcoiners they take the least amount of convincing on this stuff. They see it already. And that the world is bending towards the worldview of of Bitcoiners who understand network architecture, auditability of computer systems, energy literacy, financial literacy. Everything's breaking our way, guys. It's all breaking our way, right? The people who don't know this stuff, they're going to have to learn the hard way. Bob Builder, nuclear waste is the future. We can use nuclear waste to run plants. Yeah, absolutely. One company that does this, yeah, Oklo. I follow the Oklo guys. I think they have some Bitcoin mining stuff going on, and I think they do have one of the small modular nuclear reactors. They have a model, and I think they've tested it or something like that. I'll check it out. All right, team. Merry Christmas again. I shall see you tomorrow. I shall be more prepared tomorrow for sure. Thanks for your patience today at the beginning when I couldn't find my files and all that stuff. Yeah, strange day. Normally my kids get up at the crack of dawn, but they just caught up from all that travel and all that stuff. So they didn't wake up until 7 o'clock this morning or something, which is really rare, really, really rare. It's called Aurora, Bob Builder says. All right, yeah, stay hungry, as Bitcoin Graffiti said. If you guys don't know that illusion, we did a I Ching reading here a couple months ago when we were first interested in all of this I Ching stuff, and it gave us some pretty serendipitous advice at the time and said, stay hungry. So we're here to stay hungry. Minus 21 in Nebraska. Need a BTC space heater. Stay warm. Jared, that cold is coming this way. We get here in the Midwest, we're going to get, here in the Midwest, we're going to get, I rolled it a couple of days ago for myself. Yeah. It was scary. Oh, geez. Bitcoin Graffiti is saying he rolled the I Ching sticks the other day for himself, and it was scary. Well, share with us sometime. I'm interested. Yeah, we're getting that minus 21 here in the Midwest. It'll be, first we get a bunch of snow and rain, so it's going to get really gross, and then it's going to flash freeze. So it's not driving weather. All right, team, let me know about that reading, Bitcoin Graffiti. I'd like to hear about it. All right, guys.